What's going on, you guys? Someone recently asked me about what to do about a broker that's selling a FedEx business that will not allow financing, and if there was anything to do about that. And I want to give you a couple of quick highlights on this and give you some thoughts, and maybe this will be helpful. And so whenever I see a broker that will not allow financing for a particular deal, the question is, are they going to allow it for any deal, or is it just one specific deal? Because there are certain deals out there that are simply not going to be eligible to be financed. Sometimes the sellers have lied so terribly on their tax returns that an SBA lender, or any lender for that matter, is not going to allow financing on it. They're just trying to save you the time and the hassle of trying to go through the approval process just to realize that they're not going to actually get approved. I understand that. There are some other brokers, and this used to happen years ago, where they thought that you could not ever get financing for FedEx routes. And in their defense, that used to be true. These days, you can get finance for FedEx routes. Now, it's not exactly an easy thing, and a lot of banks still cannot actually get a deal to closing. Now, they may say, oh yeah, we can finance FedEx routes. Give us a $1,000 application fee, and we'll get right on it. You give them the fee, and then they basically take your application and throw it in the trash. So you want to be a little bit wary of any of these applications that cost a lot of money, especially with banks that have financed FedEx routes, but really haven't done a lot of them. You know, maybe they financed a FedEx route 5 years ago, and the value of the trucks was more than what the seller was actually even asking for the business. Sure, a bank can get that one financed, right? But that's not what you're really looking for. You're looking for banks that have repeated and continuous success at actually getting to the closing table, appraising these things appropriately to where they can actually be able to get you the funds that you need to be able to buy the business. So there's a lot of different things that are going to go into the very few banks that can successfully get these things financed. And also that number of banks and those banks that can get these things financed, it seems like it changes throughout the years. You know, one bank will do it for a tremendous amount of time, and then out of the blue, they'll just stop, or they'll start to backpedal a little bit, not quite finance as many deals and whatnot. So it's really important to be proactive in terms of finding those new banks that can actually get these things financed. But whenever the broker is saying, hey, there's no financing allowed on this specific deal, well, again, maybe that's just saving you time. Maybe the seller doesn't want to deal with having to wait a little bit extra or going through additional hoops to be able to get the buyer finance, because they're going to give a lot more documentation and whatnot than maybe what a typical buyer would. So sometimes it's the sellers not wanting to deal with financing. Sometimes it's the brokers that have convinced the seller that, hey, we don't want to deal with anyone that's going to get a loan. It'll probably just fall through anyway. We don't want to deal with it. Let's just wait. We'll find a cash buyer. Don't worry. And for the most part, that has been the case throughout the years, that a cash buyer will eventually pop up, and that ends up actually being reasonable advice for a seller. Now, the reality is if you can get the thing financed and the sellers haven't lied terribly on their tax returns and so on and so forth, that's actually a good thing in terms of the valuation, being able to find a much greater pool of buyers and so on. But that doesn't matter if the broker won't allow it. And again, some of these brokers were very, very insistent that, hey, you can't get financed. They weren't trying to stay on top of things. They were just trying to deal with their brokerage business and selling these things, and that's it. They're not trying to look around and find new banks that can get these things financed or whatever. So the point is that there were some brokers out there that would never allow financing. Then they realized, wait a minute, you can get financing on these things. Hey, the banks are starting to turn around, and they do like this business now. Okay, maybe we'll let some of our deals go through in terms of financing. Now, as the rates in 2023 start to go up over 10% and whatnot in a lot of these loans, a lot of people start to realize once they go through the loan process that, wait a minute, I'm only going to be getting a very small amount of actual cash flow on this business after I pay my monthly loan payment. Gosh, I'm not really interested in this business anyway. And then they just back out. So some brokers don't want to deal with those people that are not really doing the math to realize how little of cash flow is going to be left over whenever you have a 10-year term and you have 10+% on your interest rates. So The point is that whenever a broker is saying that we're not going to allow financing, there's not really much you can do. They are the gatekeepers. They are the people that make the rules for that particular deal, and you just have to kind of roll with it. It's not like you ever want to circumvent a broker or try to find the seller directly and say, oh, I need to get a loan here, or maybe you can finance me 100%. Those things don't really happen, and those things don't really go well either. You want to respect those brokers' boundaries and basically play by their rules, which of course they all end up sort of making up. But again, sometimes it's not the broker, sometimes it's the seller, sometimes it's the deal itself. It just sort of depends. But for the most part, brokers are laying out the rules and we're here to play by them. And if you want to find out how to figure out what your cash flow is going to be after a loan payment, check out this video here. And as always, like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.